the Armchair Cricket Podcast News Roundup.
Hello all, welcome to another episode of Armchair Cricket Podcast, a podcast focusing on Test cricket by armchair critics of the game. In this digest episode, let's take a look at all the international cricket that has gone on the India's tour of Australia, on the West Indian tour of New Zealand, as well as some of the interesting cricketing news from around the world. So let's straight away go into the India's tour of Australia. So the third T20i in Sydney was the game that happened in the interim, and of course Australia pulled this one back. So we know that having batted first in the third T20i, Australia made 186 for the loss of just 5 wickets, thanks to the wicketkeeper Wade, who made 80, and Maxwell, who made another stunning 54. And this meant, this was going to be a very tough chase, even though it was at Sydney, where, it has been mostly high-scoring games. I think Kohli did his best in the chase by scoring an 85 after 61. He was supported by Dhawan, who made 28, Pandya, who made 20, and then Shardul Thakur towards the end, who made 17. But the moment again Kohli was dismissed around the 18th over, the game was done. And until he was there, India stood a very good chance of taking this game. But the moment he was dismissed, the game was decided. And with that, the 3-match T20I series was decided 2-1 in India's favour. But I think it bodes well for the Indians, the way they acquitted themselves in the T20s, that, they're getting used to the Australian conditions by the looks of it. But also, when it came to how they performed in the 2 warm-up matches for the longer version, so the first one was a bit stark, where, it was a low-scoring game, and it did not really look very good as far as the Indians were concerned. But I think they learned their lesson, and the first one was actually a day game, but the second one was a day-night game with the pink ball. So I think both were very crucial as far as the practice for the touring party is concerned. The first of these 2 games that was played at the Drummond Oval in Sydney. So, Indians struggled a little. The opener struggled in both the innings, but Pujara had a 54, and then Rahane made a useful 100. That showed, at least some of the people who are not taking part in the ongoing cricket on this tour are still, able to find form. And then the bowling did its bit when it got a chance to bowl, but not before Cameron Green, the exciting debutant as far as Australia are concerned in this summer, got away with another 100 and reminded the selectors how useful he could be in the Test 11 next week. Payne made 44, and then Nasser made 33. So that meant, in the second innings, Indians really did not do that well. Only Wriddhiman Saha made 54 not out, and there were a couple of 20s, but then India could only total 189 for 9, and because there was not enough time, they got away with the draw in that game. This was the India-A versus Australia-A game, of course. In the second of the warm-up games, which was a pink ball game, held again in Sydney, this was a day-night one, and what sort of very important considering India also played pink ball test this tour, right? So in this one, Indians acquitted themselves much better. So a very exciting first day. Had India being all out for 194, where Jasprit Bumrah top scored with 55, and then Shubman Gill and Prithvi Shaw scored a bunch of useful 40s. This followed by a wonderful bowling performance by the Indian pacers, where, an all-4 pacer attack took out the Australia A side for just 108. This meant Indians had a lot of time in the game to, bed themselves in, also get used to the pink ball. They say the pink ball is tough to face at dusk. So I think they did this well. In the second innings, Mayank Agarwal scored 61, Shubman Gill 65, Hanuma Vihari scored 100, Rahane 38, and of course Rishabh Pant came back strongly with 100 as well. So this meant the India side set a very challenging target of 473 runs for Australia A, and the way it started, it could have been an easy win, it looked like, for Indian team, but then the Ben McDermott and Jack Wildermuth, both of them dug in, scored hundreds, and Alex Carey in between also scored a 50. That meant, after having taken 3 wickets in just 11 overs, Indians were made to toil for the next almost 60 overs. That was a good learning experience, it must be said. Also, when we look at how the bowling went, I think both Mohammad Shami and Jasprit Bumrah went through a couple of, rough patches, and then they seem to have found their lengths on these pitches in Australia. Mohammad Siraj also chipped in, and Navdeep Saini looked a bit lively, if a bit costly. So the spinners sort of were only used in a holding capacity. And, this gives an indication of how India might actually start their day-night test. So it could very well be that India may have 4 pacers in their 11. And it looks like at least Shami, Jasprit Bumrah are definite starters. And the way Umesh had bowled in the first practice game, he might come back into the 11 and it might be a toss-up between Siraj and Saini. Considering that Jadeja is actually injured and might not be ready in time for the first test, it looks very highly unlikely that Ashwin may play in the 11. But because Hanuma Vihari can bowl a few overs, and we saw that Prithvi Shah, if required, and Mayank Agarwal as well, if required, can bowl a couple of overs. So it remains to be seen if India will go with a 4-man pace attack or a 3-man pace attack and a spinner. We know, of course, that somebody like Pandya would have provided the necessary balance, but he's still a few months away from Test match fitness, we are told. So I think the Indian team would be eagerly awaiting his return. So these were, let's say, the ongoing games. But when we look at some of the other news from the same tour, so we know that for Australia, they're having some trouble choosing the opening batters because Warner has been ruled out, we know. And Pukovski, who had another concussion scare in the first practice game against India-A, has been pulled out of the squad. And Marcus Harris has been put in his place. Unfortunately, Joe Burns, who's the incumbent, doesn't look very confident. He scored just 62 runs across 9 innings leading up to the first test. So it remains to be seen if Australia would actually repose their faith in Joe Burns or pull him out and probably ask someone else in the 11 like Marnus Lamshkagne or Steven Smith to do a temporary holding job of opening in the first test when they can fit somebody like Cam Green into the 11. So this remains to be seen as far as Australia are concerned. When it comes to India, their opening there, it looks like it could very well be Mayank Agarwal is the incumbent, but with him, it could either be Shubman Gill or probably Prithvi Shaw. But right now, the smart money would be on Shubman Gill opening in the first test along with Mayank Agarwal. Pujara at 3, Kohli at 4, followed by Rahane, and then very highly likely Hanuma Vihari. So then comes the more interesting question. We already discussed the fast bowlers, but who would be the keeper? Now, this is really a $1 million question as far as this tour is concerned because Pant has come back with a strong performance in the last innings of the practice game. But Wriddhiman Saha is the one who's been continuously impressing, it looks like. So our pick would be Wriddhiman Saha ahead of Pant. So let's see if this comes to pass on the first test starting day. Apart from this, of course, as a very good news for Indian touring party, Rohit Sharma has been declared fit in the NCA in Bangalore. And then it looks like he'll be flying to Australia in time to join the Indian touring party and will probably get to play the last 2 tests. So with Kohli playing the first test and then having to go back home, having chosen a paternal leave, it looks like this would be a real shot in the arm as far as the Indian team is concerned. And he's been given some exercises for the 14 days that he'll be spending in quarantine to strengthen himself, improve his core strength and so on. So that will be very useful for the Indian cricket team. Let's see how this rest of the test tour unfolds. Now we were to take a look at the West Indies tour of New Zealand. So in the second test, both teams had a few people withdrawn. So Roach and Dowrich were ruled out and were pulled out of the tour by West Indies because they were injured. Kane Williamson decided to take a paternal leave as his partner was expecting a baby. As far as the results were concerned, it was pretty much the same on the field as the first test because New Zealand romped on to a comfortable innings and 16-run victory. There was a lot more, let's say, guts that was on display as far as West Indians were concerned. So New Zealand batted first and they were able to make 460 in their first innings thanks to Neil Wagner scoring 66 and at the fag end. But the linchpin of the entire innings was Henry Nicholls, who made a very useful 174. He was supported well by Will Young, who made 43, Darrell Mitchell, who made 42, and Kyle Jamieson, who made 20. The West Indians bowled really well in patches, but they could not keep the sustained pressure that is usually required to, take a bunch of wickets. Also, it must be said, I think, especially Shannon Gabriel and in certain spells, Alzari Joseph were very unlucky. Shannon Gabriel finished with 3 wickets, Alzari Joseph himself took 3, but on another day, both of these could have taken a 5-4 in the first innings. Chimar Holder, who was debuting, took 2, and Roston Chase finished off the tail with 2 as well. And when it came their turn to bat, it was again a very sorry tale as far as the West Indian top order is concerned because John Campbell made 14 and Shamar Brooks 14, but apart from that, in the top 5, there were no other big scores. Jermaine Blackwood again counterpunched with 69, and that was the only shining spot as far as the West Indians were concerned because they were 113 all out. Thanks to Tim Southey taking a 5-4 and then Kyle Jamieson taking a 5-4. So they were made to follow on because they were so far behind in the game. In this time, Craig Brathwaite and John Campbell showed a bit more fight. So they took out a bunch of time and 11 overs. In the end, it's not a lot, but it was better compared to what happened before. Craig Brathwaite, it must be said, had a very disappointing test leg of this tour, and he just made 24. John Campbell was sort of in the last chance saloon, made 68. And then another really big failure on this tour was Darren Rao, who just made 4. He was bounced out by Trent Boult. Happened to catch a part of his live, and it was very exciting to see Trent Boult sort of his bowling with his tail up. Shamar Brooks made an enterprising 36, but really couldn't carry on. And then Roston Chase had a very fallow series with the bat, which is rather rare for him. Jermaine Blackwood made 20, but then, the lower order contributed a bit to hold New Zealand up. Jason Holder finally came good, made 61. Joshua De Silva, who was the keeper, who was debuting, made 57. Azari Joseph 24, Chimar Holder 13. But, in spite of all this, useful contributions down the order, it was not enough, and New Zealand were able to finish the West Indian innings 16 runs short. When we look at the second innings analysis, Kyle Jamieson took 2 more, Trent Boult 3, Tim Southee 2, and Neil Wagner took 3 as well. So this was another comfortable victory as far as New Zealand are concerned, and they have begun to mount a serious challenge for the top 2 spots in the World Test Championship stable. When we look back at it, the 2-match loss that India had in New Zealand could be very pivotal, because as things stand, India have a couple of tough tours, one at home, one away, of course. But, New Zealand have 2 more tests at home against Pakistan, and if they're able to clinch both those tests, they stand a really, really good chance of qualifying for the finals. If you look at some of the outside the field news on this tour, so Ross Taylor has been dropped for the Pakistan T20is. Lockie Ferguson is out with injury. The ouster of Taylor from the T20 squad is a little bit of a surprise, but it looks like, I think the selectors want to try a few new faces in the 11. So, for example, Darrell Mitchell has been included. Fast bowler Jacob Duffy has been given a maiden call-up. Mitch Santler will be leading the squad. And, of course, they'll have a bunch of very exciting faces like Glenn Phillips and Devon Conway, who would be coming into the squad for the T20s. Somebody like Taylor or Kane Williamson, you would have one of these two. Because Ross Taylor, we know, has been fairly consistent, but looks like one of these two are enough in this very exciting T20 squad for New Zealand, the selectors feel. As far as Pakistan is concerned, they suffered a blow ahead of the T20 series, because Babar Azam, it looks like, has injured his finger in the nets and will sit out the T20 leg of the tour. It could be sort of a blessing in disguise if you look at it that way, because he's been very consistently performing and sort of always, taking Pakistan to victory, especially in chases. So this is a good chance for Pakistan top order to reassert itself and show what it's made of, right? And also probably someone like Shadab Khan or Imad Wasim to show how good they are when it comes to captaincy. So let's see how this T20 tour unfolds. It starts on the 18th of December, and we'll keep you posted in the upcoming episodes as well. It looks like the 4-day game between Titans and Dolphins in the South African first-class cricket tournament has been cancelled after the first day because one player has tested positive for COVID. This meant the game had to be abandoned. This is not really good news because as far as South African cricket is concerned, they are in a lot of tough times, and if upcoming tours of Sri Lanka were to be cancelled, that will be a really tough thing. CSA's acting CEO, Govender, has been suspended. She has been charged with misconduct, and there will be a hearing of this next month. So it looks like she's the second such member, because earlier, Company Secretary Welsh Gwaza was also served notice and asked to step down from his role. So all of this really doesn't bode well as far as this interim board is concerned, but we really hope things settle down for South African cricket. In other news related to COVID-19, right? So Chris Lynn and Dan Lawrence, who are currently taking part from Brisbane Heat team, were investigated with respect to a breach of COVID-19 protocol. We know that in Australia, the number of occurrences of COVID has gone down quite a lot, and people are allowed to, go to restaurants. Even players are allowed to go to restaurants. But I think they seem to have contravened some COVID-19 related regulation, and they were investigated, and the outcome is just to be published. So what it resulted in this investigation is that Chris Lynn and Dan Lawrence were withdrawn from not playing the game, but withdrawn from the squad. They were not allowed to participate with the rest of the squad when it came to training and warm-ups. Also participate with the rest of the squad when it came to sort of celebrating and other team huddles and those things. So they were allowed to play the game. So it came across as a bit strange, but this is how it has been decided to be handled. We'll see what the findings of this investigation tell us. We'll keep you in touch about this in the upcoming episode as well. In the other news, Singapore have been promoted to the global qualifier for the 2022 World Cup, the T20 World Cup, because in a recalculation of the point system, it looked like Singapore have gone above Hong Kong, and therefore they qualified to play, from the Asia Pacific region for the 2022 T20 World Cup qualifiers. And the unfortunate team to miss out here is Hong Kong, who have dropped out and will now play an additional qualifier to give themselves a chance of probably participating in one of the upcoming World Cups. Moving on, it's come to our notice that Pakistan women's cricket team will be touring South Africa in January of 2021. So this comes across as a really, really positive news as far as Pakistan women's cricket is concerned. Also, it will be the first time South African women's cricketers will get to play since March of 2020. So this is a really welcome tour and something we will be excited to look forward to. Those are all the interesting news that we wanted to cover in this episode. So thanks for listening to us and thanks for continuing to give us your patronage. We really hope you enjoy the content we share, and if you have any thoughts about it, do let us know. For example, on Twitter at Armchair Cricket Pod or via mail armchair.cricket@gmail.com. So these are some ways you could reach out to us. Also, you could leave a comment in any of the podcasting apps you do listen to us on YouTube, for example. These are all different ways. Having said all that, it's a goodbye from me and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
The Armchair Cricket Podcast News Roundup.